Welcome back, everybody, to the Moms Like Me podcast powered by Support Now. Everyone, you are in for a treat today. We have mom extraordinaire, influencer extraordinaire, Tara Clark from Modern Mom Probs joining us today. Tara, thank you so much.
Thanks, Jordan, for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
You're such a delight. And for those that aren't following her, you're missing out. So you need to go follow her on Instagram. From everything I have gathered from her Instagram over the last many months, is Tara is one of those personalities on the internet that you actually like because you feel like you can relate to them.
I try.
It's not all rainbows and butterflies and unicorns that we know, Instagram and TikTok love to kind of pull in that aesthetic to make you feel like you have to mom in a certain way. And so I'm just really excited, Tara, to have an opportunity just to talk about momming with you. Because as we all know, it can be a lonely journey and there's a lot of expectations. But first, Tara, I would love for you just to give a little bit of background on you and kind of what got you going on telling more of your story online.
Yeah, sure. So I'll backtrack it way back to early 2016, where actually, let me back a track even further. Before my son was born, I worked at Nickelodeon. I worked in social media at Nickelodeon. Loved working at Nickelodeon. It was like my favorite place, because I grew up as a Nickelodeon kid, right? And so it was a dream come true to work there. I worked with like the most talented people. And then after a very long time in trying to conceive and have my son, finally I was pregnant. That's a whole story. We could get to that later. Finally, I was like, oh, I'm going to be a mom. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to go back full time to Nickelodeon or not. And so at that time, I said, could I go back maybe like hybrid or remote or whatever? And back in 2012, that wasn't really a thing. And they were like, no, it's all or nothing. And I was like, all right, well, then I'm going to stay home with my son. So I stayed home with him until he was about 3 years old. And then I got the idea to start an Instagram account about parenting. And I even said to my friends and family, this was February of 2016. I was like, I'm going to monetize it. And they were like, what? Like, no one's even doing that. I was like, no, it's going to be a thing. It's going to be a thing. Like, follow me on this one. They're like, okay, yeah, cool. Good luck with that. And so I started my account under the name of NYC Mom Probs because I was talking about living in New York City and the problems we have in New York City are different from, other things. So then lo and behold, we moved out of New York City into the suburbs, and then I didn't have New York City mom problems anymore. I had modern mom problems. And so in April of 2017, I changed the name to Modern Mom Problems, and then it just like exploded from there. But part of the reason why I started the account in the first place, there were several reasons. One, I was looking for a creative outlet. When you have toddlers, there's just so much content and they're so funny. Well, they're both funny and hard at the same time. And so I just needed a way to connect with people. And living in New York City, I was actually very lonely. You wouldn't think living in a city of, 7 or 8 million people, you'd be like all by yourself. But guess what? I was. And so I was looking to connect with people. And so then I started making jokes and telling stories on the internet. And then it kind of just went from there. And the account really has evolved over time because when I first started, it was mostly just parenting jokes and parenting humor. But then it evolved to being anything that falls underneath the umbrella of a modern mom problem. So that could be infertility, pregnancy loss, and postpartum depression, mental health, like all of those things like fall underneath the umbrella to me. And so if that's the case, then I'm going to talk about it. And so in 2021, my book came out. In 2022, my podcast launched, and I've kind of just been doing that stuff ever since. And now my son is 12 and I have a different set of modern mom problems because it's not the same thing that it was when he was 3 when I started the account. Whole different set of them. But no, things are good. We're like in a really good place right now.
You are a true trailblazer, though. I mean, if you think about, you mentioned it earlier, monetization on a platform that people were just adopting probably felt extremely foreign. I love the ambition to write the book and then, of course, to create a podcast. I joke, everyone has a podcast now.
I know.
Podcast. What are you doing? What are you doing with your
What are
life?
you doing? Right, exactly. And one thing always it was never my intention to set out to do any number of these other things, So like I set out to do the Instagram, that's what started first. But I was featured in a local magazine back in 2019. Someone reached out to me and was like, "Hey, you should write a book about this stuff." And I was like, "You think so?" And they're like, "Yeah, of course think so." I'm like, "All right, fine." So I worked with him and he was like an editor. He hooked me up with his literary agent. She shopped the book proposal around in the spring of 2020, just as the pandemic hit, which was like the worst possible timing. So then I got my book deal, which was amazing, but then I had 6 weeks to write the book in the summer of 2020, which was the worst time. So I'm like throwing my son fruit snacks and I'm like typing up a book about like, parenting. And I'm like, here, go watch another episode of TV. But no, it was fine. And then the book came out May of 2021. So that was sort of like a whirlwind. So like I didn't set out to do that. It sort of came to me. Same thing with the podcast. People reached out to me and were like, hey, have you ever considered this? And what made me want to do the podcast is I used to do a lot of Instagram lives, and I loved doing the Instagram lives because I love connecting with people. I love sharing their stories. I love hearing their stories. And so I was like, well, instead of doing so many Instagram lives, let me just transition that to the podcast. And that's what happened.
I'm curious, Tara, like on the mom front, what do you find people really connecting with? Again, you're putting it a lot out there. I would say you put out there more than most. What do you find gets the most engagement that leads you to think, okay, this is a modern mom problem. This is what people want to be talking about.
Right. So I sort of have like a set of like 5. Now, the better question is, am I going to remember all of those right now? That's a different story. But one thing that definitely comes up over and over again is loneliness, because people are, especially mothers, tend to be very lonely. Another one is social media comparison. When I ask people on my podcast, like, what do you think is the biggest modern mom problem today? 9 times out of 10, people say social media comparison, which is heartbreaking to think that. I'm always interested in when like there's that other one person that doesn't say that. I'm always like, what's your answer on that? And it really runs the gamut. One person said like, we waste our time too much. Like it's all different things. But and that was from a cancer survivor. A cancer survivor was like, we waste too much of our time. We should be more cognizant of where we're spending our time. So I always thought that was a great answer. But social media comparison's a big one. Mental load of motherhood, huge modern mom problem. That one always resonates with people because they're like, yes, why am I taking on so many things? Why am I such a people pleaser? Those really resonate with people. And then there's like the silly day-to-day things, which I just did a post the other day about constantly having to remind your kids to brush their teeth before bed. And it's like, how is this a surprise? Like, we literally go to bed every night. We literally brush our teeth every night. We literally put our shoes on every morning when we go out the door. Like, how is this a surprise to you every single day? And that one really resonated because people were like, yes.
That's so great. I love it. And you're right. I mean, so many of those themes, they are prominent. And it is, I would imagine it's pretty interesting to you because like the social media comparison piece, that wasn't a problem for moms in 2016, 2017, 2018. That is more likely a 2022, 23, 24, 25 problem as we have adopted these technologies. Does that check out with you?
Yeah, I would probably say almost even earlier than where you were saying about 16, 17, because this 2016, 17, 18 was like prime Instagram, blonde hair, blue-eyed, big hat sort of look that was going on. So there was a lot of that then. I would actually backtrack it even earlier to maybe like 2010, 2011, like pre-Facebook, pre-Instagram, that kind of stuff. It was a big difference because I know when my son was born in 2012, so that would have been like 2013, 2014, where he was like still like a baby toddler kind of, that I was looking at social media, and it was a lot of pretty blonde girls being moms that I'm like, I'm not that. I'm just not that. It's just, first of all, I'm not blonde. I'm brunette. And second of all, it just doesn't check out. I'm 5'4" with shoes on. I'm just not my look.
But that's
probably good for them.
Which probably allowed you to stand out, though, to just be your own person and to be, not trying to fit the mold, which I think is so important.
Yeah, it is important. And that's the thing with parenting, too, is that when you first become a parent, you think there are so many things that you should be doing. I should be doing this and I should be doing that. The longer I've become a parent, the more I've realized there's a lot that you need to let go of. And you should just take those shoulds right out the door, right? Just like I'm you probably can't see me, but I'm like washing my hands, right? I'm like washing my hands of the concept of it. And you need to let go in order for both yourself and for your child. And there's one of my favorite phrases in parenting is you have to step out so that they could step in. So many times we are doing things for our children and interjecting ourselves in places where like they could probably figure it out themselves. And like I learned this hard. I am like the most like, or I was like the most helicopter of helicopter parents. And I was always like doing everything for my son and getting his shoes on and getting his jacket on and cutting his meat and all this kind of stuff. And sometimes you just have to like take a step back so that they could do it themselves, so that they could also prove to themselves that they can do it. And when they prove to themselves that they can do it, it's good for their self-esteem. It's good for their confidence. Like they're like, oh, I don't need someone to step in and rescue me all the time. I got this. And that was a lesson that I learned sort of later, but it's a lesson that I would love to impart with the parents listening, because you really do have to take a step back so that they can take a step into their own confidence in their abilities.
Tara, what about for you personally? Were you I find that every mom is a little bit different. Some people love the newborn, toddler, newborn age. Some people love the toddler stage. Some people are, nope, I want, my kids to be more adult-like where are you on that spectrum?
Oh, that is an excellent question. I loved when my son was a newborn because he was like so cuddly, and we just stayed home. He was born at the end of November, so we just stayed home and we cuddled and we watched TV. I watched TV. He didn't. I watched TV, and like that was all very like serene, sort of. I mean, yeah, it sucked that he didn't sleep and that he actually had like reflux, so he was getting sick every 2 minutes. So like, yeah, actually, I have selective memory on that. That was actually really hard. That kind of sucked. But what really was hard was when he was a toddler, he had explosive tantrums, and he was like a ticking time bomb. And so anytime we went somewhere, we know we wouldn't be able to stay for very long. And that was really hard. So he was a great baby. And then when he was about 18 months old, the tantrums really started until he was about 3.5-ish. Then when he was like 4, I was like, okay, this is great. Elementary school, amazing. He's in middle school now, also amazing, compared to where we were with those toddler tantrums. Now, I loved how snuggly he was. He's a snuggler. He like breastfed a really long time, so we're like big snugglers. But that was a really trying time, because not everyone always understands about the tantrums, because you could have several children and one has tantrums, the other one doesn't, and then the other one's like, I don't know, maybe somewhere in the middle. And it was a really challenging time for us, because I was like, why are they so explosive? Why are they so frequent? Why is he so frustrated? There was just like so many different things that went into it. But like I said, by the time he was like 3.5, 4, it kind of just went out the window. But elementary school, I would want to say, was great. It was also a little tricky because we did have the pandemic thrown in there for a while. So
sure,
he did virtual school for half of first grade and all of second grade. And then it was hard, like kind of coming back into, after that. So that was a little tricky too. But we're in a good place right now, I have to say. And I think part of why we're in a really good place is that we laid the groundwork for all those years to have a really good relationship now. It's not like we had like, an iffy relationship, and now here I am where he's like a tween being like, oh, I don't connect with him. I need to connect with him. How do we connect? It's not that. It's like we've been making like connection for years all the way through. And now that he is 12, he's able to talk to me about things that he's worried about. He's able to talk, like to express his emotions and his concerns and his fears and his happiness, like all of those things. And so it's so important to lay that groundwork all along so that you get to a point where, at 12, I probably I know I wasn't telling my mom anything. Like I was just doing my own thing, and for whatever better or worse, that's just what it was. But we're very close as a family, and it's the three of us. It's like Jack is my son, my husband and I, like we are a very close family.
I think that's really good advice too, though, because I think that there is this notion that, when you have babies and toddlers, you're really just like providing for them, you're protecting them, and then, one day you flip a switch and now you need to talk to them. Now you need to emote with them. Now you need to connect with them. And I think our generation of moms does this very differently, where
Mm-hmm.
we are constantly trying to find the emotional connection and
Yes.
really trying to connect with our kids in a way that allows emotions to be okay, allows kind of like the full range to be
Mm-hmm.
acceptable.
Yep.
And what you're saying is that while that can be very challenging, even in the toddler stage, it actually is very fundamental to kind of like stair-stepping into the relationship that you're ultimately going to want to have with your child.
Exactly. It's the scaffolding. You have to lay the scaffolding down early so that, it builds over time. Absolutely. It's not easy and it requires work. There's no two ways about that. It requires work to do it, but it's so worthwhile. And that's what I love about being a mom, about being a parent. And so I hope that, as he becomes a teenager, we can still build our relationship and work on all that so that he doesn't ever feel that he's alone or that he doesn't have anyone to talk to if he's worried about something. So
Sure.
we keep laying the foundation on that.
Tara, what are some of your parenting parenting advice icks? There's a lot of people out there that, have a lot of opinions on parenting, on momming. Is there a phrase that gets under your skin? Is there, I know there's gotta be. You're too
In that world.
in that world and you produce so much content. Like there's gotta be stuff that just makes your skin crawl.
Yeah. Oof. That's a good question. No one's ever actually asked me that before. And so I can tell you things off the top of my head.
Okay.
One thing would be people that think that parenting is one size fits all. It is not. Every child is different. Every parent is different. Every family situation is different. So you can't say this is the way that you have to parent for all kids because it's just simply not the case. And so to piggyback on that, I don't love scripts because that never worked with our family. And so I did not have the type of child that I could say, if I say this, or if he says this, then I say that, vice versa. He was not that person. He would be like, but why? No. Or he would say, that's not how you normally talk. Why are you talking like that right now? That actually happened to me before. And I was like, okay, let me backtrack and kind of think about that and think how to answer that. So scripts never worked for us because maybe he's just a different type of child that he doesn't respond to those. And so that's one thing I kind of was like, I don't love. One time I did have someone on my podcast and she's a big script person. And so we kind of it was a little awkward because I had said something and it wasn't it gives me the ick, but I was just I don't love those because they didn't work for us when we needed them. And then whatever, it was funny. It was kind of awkward. It was an awkward situation.
No, but I think, again, we have more resources now than ever as moms, which is a great thing. Overall, it's a great thing.
Yes.
And
yes.
you still have to find what works for you and what works for your family and what works for your kids. So it's not what works for me might not work for you, and that's okay.
And that's okay. And we have to respect that. And I think that's what was kind of icky about that one conversation that I had that one time, because she was like, no, well, maybe you're not doing them right. I'm like, what do you mean I'm not doing them right? So I find that if I can build the relationship with my son in such a way, then I don't need the scripts like that, because I could speak to him in a way that's more authentic to me. And so that he doesn't catch me out there and say, why are you talking like that? You never talk like that. So, and that was years ago, he was fairly young being like, what are you talking about? And I was like, I don't know.
I want to ask you a different question. So, for on the mom side of things, one of the things I'm so passionate about, and I know we've talked about in previous conversations, is around the idea of moms needing a village, right?
Oh, yes.
We need community. You talked about it earlier, one of the most common things that people feel is this sense of loneliness. And again, culturally, the way we live, the way we work, the way we socialize, it's just very different than it was a couple generations ago, where we truly raised children together. What are some things that you've done for yourself that's allowed you to build community and for you to feel support along your journey of being a mom?
As I mentioned before, when I lived in New York City, I was very alone. And so I started an online community to make friends, really. So I would have someone to talk to so that we would have DM chats where, my friends and I were like, we were in the beginning, let me tell you, we were constantly on those group chats. Like they were a lifeline for me. And I know it was for them as well. And we lived all over the country, sometimes almost all over the world. We had friends in Europe too. So find like-minded parents, like-minded women to befriend, whether it's online or in person. I love, love, love a good coffee date. I met someone earlier this week. She messaged me through Instagram, I don't know, from like a different networking organization or something like that. And she's like, let's meet up for coffee. And I was like, yeah, we had the best conversation. We knew like all the same people, like in a similar orbit. And it just made my day for the whole rest of the day. So what I would say there is like, don't be shy to put yourself out there sometimes. Don't be shy to reach out and say like, hey, you want to grab coffee? Hey, you want to meet up at the playground? Because sometimes you have your kids with you, sometimes you don't. And it's hard because no one wants to like put themselves out there in a certain way, right? Because you don't want to be disappointed or have it be awkward. But when it works and when it clicks, like, it feels so good to have these conversations. So I would say try to put yourself out there, try to meet people. For me also, I used to organize, volunteer a lot at my son's school. So when he was in elementary school, I was the PTA president for 2 years, which was tricky enough as that. But that's a separate conversation. But I was like class mother and I was involved in the PTA and it helped me to make friends. I felt good because I was doing something for the school and for the community. And that was in addition to running my business and doing the other things that I do. And so that got to a point where it almost was like too much. And then I had to take something off my plate. And so then after a while, I backed off from that because, it's a slippery slope between getting involved and then getting too involved. And then you're like, why did I say yes to everything? So you could say no. Say no. It's a complete sentence. It's okay to say no sometimes. But I love to try to get involved in in-person things as much as possible. As much as I'm online, and trust me, I'm online all the time. I really do try to get involved in in-person things when I can.
I think something you said there I want to lean into a little bit more. I recently got this advice saying, it was from my therapist. She said, if you're going to add something onto your plate, you need to take something off of it.
Yes, she's right.
And I thought that visual was very helpful for me. And I think, again, this is what happens as mom, as women, as humans, but particularly as moms. We feel this need, this desire to add, because there's an expectation if other people are doing it, well, they've figured it out. I must be able to figure that out too. But everyone is balancing a different home, work, social life balance. And so when you're constantly measuring yourself to what everyone else is doing, that's when we get sideways. So I just wanted to kind of lean into that one a little bit because I think that visual for people is super helpful because, to your point, the word no is a very hard word for people to find.
It is. It really is. I'm reading a great book right now. Highly recommend it. It's called Adventures of a People Pleaser by Amy Wilson. It just came out this week and I'm about halfway through it right now. And it's a series of essays that are sort of like her memoir about like how she became a people pleaser. And she's part of a big family, and it happened when she was at church, and she always like tried to be a good girl, and she tried to do the right thing, and she tried to take on so much stuff, and so it's interesting. I really recommend that book because as a recovering people pleaser, because I'm getting better and I'm saying no and I'm not taking on as much stuff. It really resonated with me, and I find that I'm not alone in that because the more I was talking about it, whether it was online, people were like, yes, me too. I'm trying to be better about it. So I'm glad that there's awareness on it now too, because I feel like this is something that people weren't really talking about so much several years ago, just like the mental load, because inherently the mental load of motherhood and the people pleasing, they go hand in hand, right? And so it's all sort of this invisible labor, cognitive labor, they call it. So it really goes together. So I recommend that book.
Do you think it's harder to be a mom today than it was 20, 30 years ago?
I think that it is harder to be a mom today than it was 30 years ago because parenting is now this like competitive sport. We have our kids in so many activities, and we have the social media comparison with like, oh, what's she up to? Oh, her hair looks amazing, and she's so fit, and she's running her own small business, and she's taking all 5 kids to practice, and she's cooking all of her own homemade meals. There's so many things. There's so many comparison. And it's not that in previous generations women didn't have, let's say, magazines. Like there was like Cosmopolitan or Vogue that you were reading, and you were trying to keep up with like the celebrities and that sort of thing, or maybe even just simply keeping up with the Joneses in your own neighborhood. But this is so much more global, and it's so much more constant. I mean, how many times a day do you pick up your phone and scroll, and then you're just bombarded with all of these images? So there's that. And then, like I said, parenting being a multi-billion-dollar industry now between books and self-help classes. And there's just so many different things that go into it now. And I love it because it's helped me become a better parent to have knowledge and going back to the scripts, right? Having like the scripts and like all of those things, right, that we now have. I mean, I constantly read parenting books for my job, right? So my brain is like full of all of these different concepts. And I'm grateful for that, but it is overwhelming. It can be a sense of information overload. So you have to weed through the things, to your point earlier, that work for your family versus the things that don't necessarily work for your family, and then pursue that. And for me, a lot of that was just letting go of societal expectations, where I don't know necessarily if parents from 30 years ago really had quite those same parental expectations, in as much as they were expected to feed and clothe their children, send them to school, and probably drop them off at practice, that kind of stuff. But as kids, we were out of the house all day. We were not home. They didn't know where we were because we didn't really have cell phones. So it was just a very different time. You're going to laugh. I was at a restaurant the other day, and I was online getting soda, and I was behind these two 16-year-old girls. And I know that they were 16 because they said it somehow in their conversation. And the one girl said to her friend, my mom told me that back in the 90s, they would go out and their parents wouldn't know where they were because they didn't have cell phones. They had no technology for communication. And the other girl was like, oh my God, yeah, I heard that. And meanwhile, I'm like behind that. I am dying. I'm like, oh my God, I am a dinosaur. And it was like almost something out of like a TV show, but it was very much real. And
Oh man.
it was pretty wild. And I was like they're going blink, blink. Like I was blinking, and I was like, what is happening here? But she was like, they had no way. Can you believe that? She's like, yeah, I heard that. I heard about that. I was like, oh my God.
Leave it to some 16-year-olds to humble you very quickly on your morning outing. I mean,
very quickly.
It's a great story though, because and it is so true. It just speaks to just how sharply different it is, like in contrast of, there was a time where you would go to parties and you had no cell phone, or there was a time where people, if you needed to call someone, you were in an emergency, you needed to find a house phone or a payphone, and it wasn't that long ago.
It really wasn't, because I'm 44, right? And I don't feel like I'm that old. And the fact that, we didn't have cell phones really in high school. We did in college. I properly had both a cell phone and internet when I was in college, but not high school. We were old generation in that sense.
I always wonder too, and more information and research is coming out about this topic, and the great rewiring of the brain for children with phones and certainly social media. But I always consider myself very lucky to have grown up in a world that I understood both with technology and without technology.
Yes, I'm very grateful for that too.
I am so grateful for that. I think they talk about that with the older millennial types, where we really are the last generation to go through childhood and really life with knowing that. And so I know even for myself, when I'm ingesting social media, I can tell when I'm starting to, I'm crawling into that social media creep of comparison. And I'm so so grateful that I have that measuring, like that ability to measure, okay, I'm now I it's time to put the phone down because this is
Mhm.
affecting how I'm feeling.
Mhm.
And you think about kids today, of course, and I know this is, a debate that's happening across the country of like, how do you protect the mental health of your kids that don't know what it's like to live in a world where you don't have a cell phone to compare yourself to other kids all the time constantly. It is a very unique challenge. You're on the precipice of it. You're probably in it now with a 12-year-old. My children are much younger, where I'm hoping that moms like you can pave the way to teach us what we should be doing, because it's such uncharted territory. I'm sure you feel that pressure. I'm sure you feel that angst of like, is this the right approach? Because there's both what the scientists will tell you, and the doctors and the psychologists will tell you, and then there's a very practical, this is what their peers are doing. These are what the other parents are allowing. Can you speak to
Yes.
that at all?
Yes, definitely. So we are very intentional about our phone usage at home. Now, I'm not saying all screen time, but I'm specifically saying phones, and I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. My son has a phone that he got for Christmas 2 years, not this past Christmas, but like last Christmas. It is a totally stripped down phone. You could only make phone calls on it and play chess. Those are the two things it has. It has chess and it has phone calls. And he was like, "Oh, okay, gee, thanks." It wasn't what he was thinking when he like asked for a phone, right? So we're like, "Well, you asked for a phone. You got what you asked for." And so he has it in his backpack at school for emergencies. When we are in the car, he is never on his phone. He is not the type of kid that's like, he's actually never on that phone. It's really, like I said, it's chess and for calls for emergencies. He has an iPad that he games on, and that's like his primary device. Like he plays, I don't know, Roblox, and he'll go on YouTube Shorts, which I don't love, but that's just what it is. And that's where he'll spend his time. He has friends, his peers, that the second they walk out of school, they are hunched over like shrimp, holding their phones and scrolling TikTok and scrolling YouTube Shorts and playing some sort of game. And it breaks my heart to see that because it's like immediate. Like literally the school bell rings, they walk out and they're instantly on the phones. My son is not like that, and we're doing that intentionally because we want to try to give him more of a childhood, to extend it as much as we can. We have a friend that we drive to practice on Tuesdays, and she's on her phone the entire time, and she tried to call some other friends from the car on Tuesday, and we were like, and so for me, it's awkward because I want to step in and like try to give some guidance there, but it's awkward to give guidance to someone else's child. And it's tricky. It's tricky. We have a friend, another mom, who she had a bunch of the children in the car one day, and this other boy, he's on his phone just all the time, like nonstop. He's like the one I said is like a shrimp, like hunched over his phone the second he walks out of school. And she did say something to him one time in the car with all of the other boys, and sort of like called him out for that. But it's challenging. It starts at home. There are no two ways to say that. Like it starts with intentionality. It starts with conversation with your children about phone usage, and then also modeling good usage for them. If they always just see you on your phone and you're constantly just like talking to them with the phone, in front of your face, then you have to sort of think about your usage as well. And I have to be cognizant of that too, because sometimes like my son will be like, "Well, mom, like you were on your phone." And sometimes he thinks I'm on my phone and I'm not, and it's just sort of just in my hand. But because he was like showing me something and I just happened to like have it with me, but whatever. That's a separate conversation. But I think going back to answer the question, it's definitely look at your own usage so that you're modeling good behavior for them, have the conversations with them, and sort of set that certain expectations around the usage. Like I said, my son doesn't use devices in the car. We have conversations. We listen to the radio. We kind of just hang out together. But that's not the case for all of the other kids, like our friends that we drive to practice, and she's, on her phone from the second. And it's funny because she like blares her music. And then like if my husband's driving us to practice, like he doesn't get to listen to his music. And so there's like competing music in the car and it's kind of crazy. So I always shut off like our music so that like her music can play. But it's a hard way to navigate that. She's not my kid, like I could say like, oh, maybe like put it down a little bit, but I'm not going to tell her to like stop playing it. So it's tricky. I really do hope that in the next few years there will be some sort of legislation that's passed to continue to protect the children because it is so important. It's so important. And my son, he's not really concerned with social media at this point. He is on YouTube Shorts, so technically that is considered social media, but it's not, Instagram, TikTok, or anything like that. But he does have friends that are on TikTok, although they shouldn't be because technically 13 is the age cutoff for anyone to be on both Meta platforms and TikTok. But they're 12 and younger, and they're all on it.
Yeah, I mean, certainly all things TikTok is a story for a different day. We will see how everything unfolds. I think this is actually a wonderful place to stop at because you have offered, Tara, so much of what I was hoping in this conversation, right? Advice and perspective on everything from a newborn baby cuddles all the way to your 12-year-old. And doing so in a way that, again, is both informed and funny and relatable. So, Tara, I'm so grateful for your time. Where can people find more of you if they want to follow you and find more of your content?
Oh, thanks, Jordan. I really appreciate it. I loved this conversation. So you can follow me on Modern Mom Probs on Instagram. And actually, I'm big into branding. So anything that you could find at Modern Mom Probs, it's me. YouTube, TikTok, I don't know. I'm starting a YouTube channel, so we'll see how that goes. Instagram. I have a podcast named Modern Mom Probs. It's kind of on hiatus right now, but I'm going to be coming back with some new episodes, including with Jordan. So check that out. It's available wherever you listen to podcasts.
Thank you, Tara, so much. A great way to start the new year is with your perspective. We are so grateful. And, for anyone listening, part of the reason why I wanted to bring Tara on is we love talking to normal moms like us that are navigating all sorts of things. And Tara has certainly done that both online and in her in-person community. So looking forward to future conversations with you, Tara.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jordan. I really appreciate it.